Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining us back here again for your favorite fourth tier podcast with second tier haircuts and first tier guests. Today, we're joined by Sultan. He is a Bitcoin OG and a gangster, been mining Bitcoin for years out of Venezuela, and he has recently become a little bit of kind of a cultural phenomenon on Bitcoin Twitter due to some statements that he's made and some things about the way that he was able to matriculate out of Venezuela through Bitcoin mining. And so we're just super excited to talk to him. Sultan, thank you for joining us. And if you would, can you kind of walk us through sort of where you're at in your life now and how you got there, starting in Venezuela and to the point where you're at now, and kind of how you were able to get there?
Yeah, look, at this point, it's been this is gonna be the 13th year since I got into Bitcoin. 13 years ago, I was just like at my house. I was helping my pops put together like a PC for his company. He's an architect, so he needed like a sick graphics cards or whatever. He had this small business in the country where he had to sometimes like import goods from outside of the country. It was also like an issue, uh, s- you know, ever since he started his business in Venezuela, like in the 90s, and Chavez became a president, to basically make yourself with dollars, right? To pay for goods outside of Venezuela, you like being unable on their control currency exchange, being able to make payments, with your Venezuelan bank account, basically. So I built this PC for my dad. Then he had this like payments issue, and I'm like, Dad, maybe there's this thing called Bitcoin that we could use that we could even mine with the computers that you have, in your office. And we could start like using Bitcoin to make payments to Europe, etc., and keep like importing goods. And then also we can buy this Bitcoin thing with bolivars. So all of the goods that you sell, we're able to like grab all the free cash flow that you have in bolivars, buy Bitcoin, and then repay your suppliers to keep importing goods into the country. So that's how I initially got into Bitcoin. Like I just wanted to help my dad.
How did you okay, wait, so how did you know about Bitcoin?
Yeah, I was in high school at
Yeah.
the time, and I had already a friend in high school who had mined Bitcoin with graphics card. Same thing. We were all basically PC gamers or something, right? And
And you
so
like learning
yeah,
about Bitcoin on Reddit or like on community threads, or like where do you guys even I mean, I remember I saw the white paper in 2009 on Reddit. I read it and then just completely forgot about it for like 12 years, 11 years.
yeah, look, 2013, I think combination of Reddit, but also just Twitter and YouTube, right? Like
Okay.
you already found like tutorials on YouTube and people talking about mining, and how you could configure the ASICs. That was all like almost like publicly available at that point.
Crazy.
And so we were these like teenagers watching these videos on YouTube of like huge mining farms in China, and we're like, okay, how do we get into this? So from graphics card to the first ASICs to importing one of the first S1s and S3s into Venezuela, co-founding one of the first Bitcoin mining farms in Venezuela, helping other people install Bitcoin mining farms. Man, that whole era for Venezuelans was really the that Bitcoin mining boom in Venezuela, which basically kickstarted the P2P market in Latin America. It was all
Okay.
feeded by Bitcoin mining activity and local Bitcoins volume coming from Venezuela, basically. Um, but really, Bitcoin mining back then, in 2013, 14, 15 in Venezuela, mostly the people that got later after I would say the early adopter group, we were like 20 people building Bitcoin mining farms, right? All those hundreds and thousands of people that mined Bitcoin in the country afterwards, they really just wanted to make themselves with dollars, not with Bitcoin.
So they
Okay.
were just selling it immediately.
Yeah. So I would say like in 2013, 2012 in Venezuela, it was maybe a group of maximum 30 people talking about Bitcoin as the future of the internet money, digital gold, the internet gold. Those were basically the discussion stands. So look, that was an amazing ride. I had at some point 200 to 300 ASIC units running at the same time. I co-founded everything with like private capital, funded my family, my dad, etc. So basically, my co-founder was my dad. By 2015, 2016, when the Venezuelan government really started seeing this noticeable activity of Bitcoin mining in the country, right? People are like using excess energy in some parts of the capital in the country to what is this Bitcoin mining thing, and really like start digging into it, right? That's when we cashed out and got out of seized all of our Bitcoin mining operations and sold it because you were starting to fall under the radar of the Venezuelan government. 2017 is when the seizure, 2016, 2017 is when the seizure of Bitcoin mining hardware really started because in 2017, US sanctions kicked in the country.
Okay.
And that's when really for the government, after for like a year and a year and a half studying Bitcoin mining and P2P markets and local Bitcoins, etc., and cracking down some CeFi exchanges, right? People that were opening accounts in banks in Venezuela and trying to be the Kraken or the Coinbase of Venezuela. All of those experiments failed and were cracked down in Venezuela because the government had the ability to go directly to the bank and ask them to close and like seize the assets in the bank. The only platform and activity that continued like subsisting the purview of the government in 2016, 2017 was P2P markets, so local Bitcoins, right? Because it's fully P2P. There's no way to like, right? And then Bitcoin mining. So by 2017, with the sanctions, that's what forced the Venezuelan regime to really say, hey, we gotta find an alternative. We can use the SWIFT system any longer. We can use the SEPA payment system in Europe. The state oil company is sanctioned. The central bank is sanctioned. The main government officials are sanctioned. A network of over 100 people close with close ties to the government got sanctioned. What do we use? Right?
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's really when I said, okay, in Venezuela, there's really, first of all, there's no law for mining Bitcoin anymore. Like, you are getting into a high risk business if you want to mine Bitcoin in Venezuela, because you will need to get a Bitcoin mining license issued by the Venezuelan government. A ministry of cryptocurrency, the SUNACrypt, was created, right? And
Mm.
so um, it really became difficult. By 2017, I said maybe we really also have like a custody problem in Venezuela. By 2017, that's when really, on Bitcoin Twitter, people were really talking about like, hardcore self custody, run your own node kind of thing. Run Lightning over your node when you didn't even have like a Lightning wallet. I ran one of the first Bitcoin Lightning nodes inside Venezuela. I got the Lightning torch back then when people rotated it all over the world. So that was super cool. I mean, all that history of mining in Venezuela, whatever. Uh, really, Venezuela was like an interesting topic when you talk to Bitcoiners globally. But I would argue that until 2017, when hyperinflation kicked in Venezuela, really wasn't on social media like the Bitcoin community wanting to uh, discuss so much about Venezuela. So that gave me the opportunity to basically open up my voice to the Bitcoin community and start telling my story, start telling what's happening in Venezuela, etc. I had this small custody startup in Venezuela. I was trying to help the Venezuelan central bank build like a multi-signature scheme to custody Bitcoin in Venezuela, because I was trying to argue that if Venezuela, it had already been the country with the most mining activity and most P2P activity for Bitcoin in
Mhm.
South America, why shouldn't we develop a multi-signature solution to have Bitcoins ourselves and custody them? That's when no El Salvador, no Nayib Bukele
Yeah.
existed, no nation states were still in a Bitcoin, and you were an idiot talking about Bitcoin with central bankers.
Did anybody listen?
Some people listen,
Yeah.
but until now, it's been a hard business and a sanctioned business dealing with the Venezuelan government. So, dude,
Yeah.
after 2017 and how everything developed in Venezuela, I said, it is dirty business. It is hard business. I'm gonna try, to finally be migrate outside of the country. Bitcoin and all this industry was really going way more global, and I said, who can I help co-found another startup globally? So I joined Leden this with via this Venezuelan co-founder Mauricio Di Bartolomeo. He already knew me from the Bitcoin Venezuelan scene. I said, man, I'm getting out of Venezuela. How can I give you a hand? So I joined Lenin's marketing team. I was like the 15th person to join the team. Now they're like, I saw the company grow all the way up to 137 people. We raised more than $570 million at Lenin, man, after I joined. It was a rocket ship, but, eventually the FTX thing happened, right? So it wasn't a sexy business being on the lending side of Bitcoin. And I decided, I had met this Luxor technology co-founder in El Salvador, Ethan Vera. I reached out to him and like, man, do you need a quarterback on your sales team or marketing team or whatever? A heavy, like a hectic Bitcoiner, somebody that knows the industry, whatever. And really that was a right, man, because I didn't know much about Luxor technology before joining, honestly. I knew that was like related to Bitcoin mining software services. They had like a pool or whatever. But that was an amazing ride. And that was probably the hardest Bitcoin pill that I've had to swallow in this 13 years of everything that I've done in Bitcoin. I helped Luxor launch hash rate derivatives. So basically we were the first people to like sell, like market as a commodity, Bitcoin compute power. It's fucked,
Oh, okay.
man. For me that
Yeah.
I started in all of this basically connecting almost like an ASIC next to my microwave with free electricity in Venezuela to data centers at the intersection of AI HPC, curtailing energy in Texas with aircut programs. What the heck, man? That's beautiful to see.
It is
So
beautiful, and I'm really
uh,
interested, Sultan, in the social context in which you begin to do all this, like back when you're first starting in 12 or 13 or whenever. So you'd said 2017 is when hyperinflation hits, and that's when it becomes a hot
yeah.
topic for Venezuela. But even before then, so just from an outside perspective, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but Venezuelans known for having kind of a socialist revolutionary movement and socialist ideology. How did that, you growing up in that environment, I suppose it's taught in the high schools. How does that kind of interact with the ideology you're getting through Bitcoin of this kind of international free market?
Yeah, man. I mean, they took every single sector in Venezuela is taken by the government. Okay, so all this socialist interaction for 25 years of my lifetime almost is just, dude. There's you gotta always try to reduce the state however you can. Okay, you gotta take as much as you can from the state, honestly. So right now, after everything that happened with the U.S. intervention in Venezuela, now it's a gradual game of how do we continue reducing the state and privatize shit. Okay, so I when I went to high school, I bought one empanada with like 20 or 50 bolivars. If you account for the 14 zeros that have been removed from the Venezuelan bolivar, you're almost talking about a quadrillion bolivars to buy that same empanada. So you went from 20 and 50 to 5 quadrillion. It almost sounds stupid.
It
Okay?
is
Like
it is insane,
it
right?
okay?
Yeah.
It almost sounds like what are you talking about, you idiot?
How is
No, it's
anyone
it's the
still
it's the
alive?
number.
How can anyone
Yeah.
live there? Like
Yeah,
I mean,
so
so I lived in Colombia. I lived in Pasto, and at the intersection of every single street corner, there would be people who were, panhandling or like doing something at the intersection. And I remember asking my host, I was like, the people that are at your intersections, they're way more entertaining than the people that ask for money at intersections in the United States. And he said, well, these are all like these are Venezuelan people that walked here from Venezuela to escape the country. And these are not people that are down on their luck by their own choice. These are people that lost everything because of what the government did to their money. So,
Yeah.
I mean, what, just like in terms of like, can you frame what has the exodus of Venezuelan people been like, and what is it like for the people that remain? Because we're not sure what to believe about the news that comes out of Venezuela post the hijacking of Maduro and
Hmm.
taking him for a ride. So,
Hmm.
yeah, I mean, who is left, and what do they think about the situation with the United States coming in and kidnapping a president?
Who's left? Old people, poor people. Okay, and that accounts for like 70 or 80 or more percent. Okay, and all the wealthy, most of the wealthy people that left the country were the ones that left the country, and the people that actually had like a college degree and stuff. So it's really not that much, because also at some point, even if you are a part of the new generation, you start figuring out how to work over the internet. You are looking to make the most amount of money that you can to just go to another better digital hub in South America or Europe or whatever,
Okay.
because you need light, you need better internet connectivity, you want better wages. Because if you're talking to a potential employer, you're not from Venezuela, they're kind of like, y- you just earn less money. So
Yeah.
yeah, so I'll tell you, I am excited of the Venezuelan exit. Nowadays, I'm excited of how all these years the Venezuelan diaspora has built this network of knowledge, okay, globally, of Venezuelans globally. Man, Brazil has 220, almost 207 or 210 million people. Okay. Brazilians love the US. There's a lot of Brazilians in the US, but there's like 600,000. They're not even a million. There's more than a million Venezuelans. We're a country of 30 million people, not 210 million people.
Oh,
Okay.
wow.
And there's probably
A
three.
country the size of LA, basically, a
Yeah.
little bigger than LA. And,
Yeah.
yeah, and 1/30th of that has moved just to the United States.
Yeah. I want to answer a part of your question that's related to this whole social layer, that it's, if you read this Andrew Dickens Money and Hyperinflation, what's it called? It's Fiat Money, Inflation, and Friends by White Andrew Dickens, right? That's like the whole that's like the whole history of how hyperinflation happened for a second time in France after it had happened already, okay? The first time, whatever. Dude, it's the same shit. Okay. It's like hyperinflation had happened like 2 generations ago. The grandparents of whoever were, the new generation in 1974 were the ones that remembered what ended up being the result of printing money and issuing a new currency and all of that. But the new generation didn't know it. So you got new politicians and new senators talking about, hey, you know what? We're going to survive this economic crisis with this new currency, and it's going to be backed by land. And that's why it's not going to fail this time. And they ended up melting even like, you know, gold from churches and shit to back new currency issuances. So, bro, take it to the 21st century in Venezuela. It's the same playbook. Okay? It is the same playbook. Fiat is a hard bitch to kill. That is one of the it- that is one of the most certain things that a Venezuelan can have learned today. Because still, 75% today, 75% of the transactions in the Venezuelan economy are in bolivars. The Venezuelan government collects more than almost like $6 or $4 billion a year from taxes in bolivars. The biggest buy now, pay later startup of Latin America is Venezuelan, and it only Cachea, and it only operates in Venezuela in bolivars.
Wow. Man, um, I wanna go
You know
back to
what? You know what, man? It's one more currency. And if it becomes a bad currency, the market will look for a better form of currency. And that's exactly what happened in Venezuela. People started trying to look for, payments in digital payments in dollars. Oh, what is this cryptocurrency alternative? Right? Then stablecoins came and the whole stablecoin factor. Like I've for 10 years, I was a hardcore Bitcoin maxi. I still am. Like I root for Bitcoin, but USDT became 90% of the crypto transactions in Venezuela. When I, as a miner from 2013 all the way almost to 2017, saw that most of the volume was all Bitcoin. All the remittances and payments being sent in and out of Venezuela were mainly being transmitted through local Bitcoins and Bitcoin. And Bitcoin lost that to USDT and Binance.
Yep. And now the US can export their inflation through that digital dollar by forcing those companies to back it with US debt. Um,
I told you this at the beginning, guys. Like in 2014, 15, 16, 17, people mining didn't want Bitcoin. People mining in
yeah,
Venezuela mostly wanted dollars.
yeah.
They wanted Bitcoin to sell it for dollars, and they saw Bitcoin mining as a rent in dollars. Because
Okay.
Bitcoin mining made you more a month than being a doctor.
That makes sense. What, so in during this time frame when the government comes in and they start seizing Bitcoin miners and they start, taking those away from people, we've heard on Twitter that there's possibly a stash of like 600,000 Bitcoin, 660,000 or whatever,
Uh huh.
supposedly that the Venezuelan government has. Is that where that came from? Were they just taking over these operations and running these miners, or were they forcing people to give up their private keys, or like, or is it even real? Like what?
That is an excellent question. I have an embargo draft that will be soon published about my full point of view on the 600,000 Bitcoin.
Uh huh.
The conclusion is that is an overestimated figure. Okay. I am not disputing that there isn't a Bitcoin stash inside of Venezuela or a crypto stash. It is indeed, and you can have it for certain, a combination of Bitcoin and USDT. That is for certain. Okay. But it is impossible for it to be 600,000 Bitcoin, man. The hardware that the Venezuelan government seized was mostly S7s and S9s. Okay, Bitmains, S7s, and S9s. That is very antiquated Bitcoin mining hardware. Okay, and after this, the seizure of Bitcoin mining hardware escalated in the country. Imports of Bitcoin mining hardware to Venezuela tanked.
Right. Yep.
Okay? Tanked. No, but almost nobody mines nowadays with whatever mining hash rate is left in Venezuela with an S19 or S17 or S15. None of the like old gen, mid gen mining hardware are available at a great scale in Venezuela. It's very old generation hardware. Okay. So take into account that we got to one zeta hash of like hash rate in Bitcoin, okay? It is impossible for them to have mined hundreds of thousands of Bitcoin. Also, because the way the seizure and the halting of mining operations happened in Venezuela was forcefully, was under an extortion. It was extortion. So they disconnected the hardware. Some of the hardware was destroyed. Some of the hardware was burned because you're great at seizing
Out here killing the golden
but you're
goose,
not
man.
great at running Bitcoin miners.
Yeah,
You
just
have the
slaying
knowledge,
calves. That is horrific, man.
okay? All right. So that is one way the Venezuelan government for sure amassed Bitcoin. The problem with governments and socialist governments is also corruption, man. So a lot of those Bitcoin mined were just like stolen. okay, were sold via OTCs to send it to accounts in Switzerland, or we don't know right now. We will know in some years because now the US will study all those flows. And all that shit will be, I believe all that shit will be published, man. Okay. The tools exist to track all of that. They just have to continue getting the right people and like interview them. So the other two more points related to the 600,000 Bitcoin. Okay. The other thing that they're arguing publicly or like on social media is that potentially the Venezuelan government swapped some gold for Bitcoin. Okay. I think it's like an estimate from 7 to 8 tons of gold that are missing. Okay. Out of the central bank's reserves. All right. Supposedly that was shipped overseas in like 2017, 2018. Okay. We're talking about when Bitcoin hit like between, crossing $1,000, tens of thousands of dollars. Trump was president in the US, right? Just becoming president, sanctions kicking in. The government is starting to figure out a way to work with crypto, and you're telling me they swapped 7 tons of gold for Bitcoin? Who who gives you Bitcoin for 7 tons of gold? Tell me right
Hmm.
now.
Interesting.
No, man.
Yeah.
Like that's all bullshit, honestly. So I don't know where this 600,000 figure of Bitcoin actually started to come from. I've obviously seen the tweets, the charts, Venezuela, 600,000 Bitcoin, whatever. No, man. I mean, the level of incompetence and corruption that has the Venezuelan government has had to go through in relation to cryptocurrency or Bitcoin or whatever is so great that it is extremely hard for me to believe that it is 600,000 Bitcoin, the amount that we have. Again, I am not ruling out that at some point we amassed or that amount of Bitcoin went through Venezuela, but it's now elsewhere. Okay. And if there's something left of those Bitcoin, it's also potentially spread it in hundreds and thousands of keys, man, or exchanges, Binance and stuff.
Yeah. Um, you, I mean, yeah, you speak so energetically about Venezuela, and Grant and I are both from little farms in Kansas, and we both have this like we talk about this often, like we have this strong draw to where we came from, and it's always something that you know, no matter where you go, you always feel this draw to return. Is going back to Venezuela something that you would ever consider?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. Okay. Also, because today I'm a father, I want my daughter to live like at least a couple of years in Venezuela. If there's been a good time to turn back to go back, you know, it may be pretty soon.
Yeah.
Okay. So, man, if I can, in any way I can, funnel all of the network and all of the knowledge that I've built through Bitcoin to rebuild Venezuela, I will do it. I will do my
What
best.
is the role that Bitcoin could or would play in rebuilding Venezuela if what the
Yeah.
government lacked before was the competence to integrate Bitcoin mining into a petroleum-based economy when you have socialists who want to steal everything? What does the future look like when you don't have that? When you have people like you with an immense amount of expertise, how does Bitcoin mining re-enter the picture? What does Bitcoin look like in Venezuela?
Yeah, I think it is I would love for it to be a combination of a Bitcoin national reserve. Okay. Right. And so, what is a first step to make that happen? Who would potentially custody those Bitcoin in Venezuela? Maybe the Venezuelan central bank, okay? Because you help stabilize the bolivar if you back the bolivar some way with the Bitcoin National Reserve, right? Not only a combination of dollars and euros and other fiat currencies. It is trying to replicate the El Salvador model in Venezuela. I would love to see that, okay? To some extent.
To just not
Obviously,
have
Emily,
just don't have a central bank and just say, look, we're not
that,
going to be in
that's
the business of money. We're just going to have Bitcoin, and you
I
guys,
I would
you guys can
love to
use whatever you want.
I would love to close the Venezuelan central bank out of more than 100 years of Venezuelan central banking history. We've done a terrible job
Yeah,
even before this
they're horrible at their
administration.
job. They're horrible
Horrible
at their job.
job at protecting the value of the bolivar. Okay, horrible job. So, what is the point? What is the sense of it? None. But right now there has to be a Venezuelan central bank because we need an agreement with the IMF. We need an agreement with the United States. It is as of today finally an unsanctioned central bank by the United States. $500 million worth of oil were sent to the Venezuelan central bank today under the agreement that the Venezuelan central bank will use that money to buy agricultural products from the US. Okay? So first, I would love for eventually see Venezuela have a Bitcoin national reserve. Okay? What is needed? What is needed is the rule of law, man. Honestly, like, don't fuck with people's Bitcoin. Don't fuck with the exchanges. Don't go seize them. Okay. Lower the taxes. Who's going to bring you Bitcoin if you tax it at, 16 or whatever
Yeah,
percent? Actually, cryptocurrency transactions are not taxed in Venezuela. So there
really.
is a very robust crypto regulatory framework in Venezuela. I would argue that it also needs to be diminished. Okay. These licenses for Bitcoin mining activity thing, so it just makes it more bureaucratic. Okay. Uh, zero taxes for overseas companies, everything. I mean, now Bitcoin mining, it's the same discussion. Okay. You need to give reassurance of, like, first, give back all the seeds mining hardware. It can be outdated as shit, but whatever you have, give it back. That will start, like, giving a signal, okay, to the international Bitcoin mining investment community. Bitcoin miners, especially like in the US, even Russia, China, whatever, they love talking about Venezuela. It's obviously a huge stockpile of gas energy, oil energy, hydroelectric energy. There is megawatts and gigawatts of energy available in Venezuela at the cheapest of prices globally. Up until now, it's only been just like a high risk market. So, how do you deal with that? Okay. At large scale, you can. So, it's been impossible with the current state of, like, the rule of law in Venezuela to finance a Texas Bitcoin mining data center equivalent inside of Venezuela. Okay, it's just crazy. So that needs to come. All right. So I would love, man, I would love to see the military National Guard be completely restructured because there's thousands of people, just connected to the government. I just do not know right now if that is going to happen. I would love for that to happen, but I think that's going to be a long work that it's going to take many years for the United States government. I don't think it's only just a thing of removing Maduro. It is the first step on the positive direction of a very long marathon, and we're maybe in the first kilometers.
So what else needs to be done? So you've in kind of essence, one could look at this situation and say, well, the head has been cut off of the snake, but obviously it's a hydra, multiple-headed Medusa, and there's so much more beneath the surface. It's very unclear whether or not the remaining regime will be able to work with the United States in a productive way. And so what else needs to be done?
hmm Well, right now, the U.S. Embassy is reopened. So
Okay,
the CIA and the FBI and the United States will have, day to day operations in Venezuela. That is a great step. Okay. But we need the help of the United States to, like, restructure the military guard. Because, like, the opposition doesn't talk to the military. And that's the problem. I think that's the main problem we Venezuelans have. The opposition is not talking to the military. I understand it. The military is fully bought, and we need the help of the United States to remove the part of the military that is bought. But I
gotcha.
believe there is really nowadays a part of the military that also sees the reality of socialism. Okay, they just want to see another leader there. But neither Maria Corina Machado nor Edmundo Gonzalez really talk in person to military guards.
And so those are the ones that were the Gonzalez. He was democratically elected. He's the candidate that's kind of, if we looked at the last election results, is the popular winner. And now Delcy Rodriguez is kind of the de facto leader, the remaining regime element. That's kind of the situation, right?
Yeah, correct. Because like you remove the president, who gets in as president? The interim vice president. And so Um, I look, man. I find it hard to believe. Maybe I'm just very, what is it? Ignorant in
Cynical.
special military operations, and like SEAL Six instead and Delta Force. Whoever knows, but why didn't they take out the five guys at the same time? Well, they argue that it's because they had to train for months on under a specific location that they knew how it was designed to capture Maduro and go in 30 minutes capture Maduro once he was finally at that specific location that they had, been training for to like, right? Like intervene or whatever.
Hmm.
So I don't know. I think Maduro was also sold.
You think he was put up? So who do you think sold him?
The Rodriguez, the vice president.
Rodriguez? Yeah, I mean, that's a great way to get a promotion. Like if you could just sell your boss and then take his job, that not only do you get rich, you get his job as well.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, I'd do it if I had a
Yeah.
boss.
There's basically five families ruling Venezuela.
Okay.
One is done.
Okay.
You need to remove, I think, like two more to solve the military and the police thing and whatever. And I think that's going to be part of the agreement with the US. So all their heads are going to have to fall, man.
So do you think it'll be one of those kind of like the golden parachute thing where the U.S. is going to pay off those families to get out of there? Or do you think that they'll violently remove them or just forcefully remove them?
I think it depends on how they interact these
Yeah.
next months and
Yeah.
weeks, etc. But so far, honestly, for them, for the Rodriguez, honestly, so far so good, man. We could see Delcy Rodriguez maybe be 2 years, 4 years president of Venezuela.
Because you
Unt-
wouldn't say that you wouldn't say that those four remaining families have a lot of popular support, right? I mean, if you polled the people, clearly they tried to elect somebody else. So um, do you think? I mean, God, I hate to. I have a brother. I have a brother-in-law that's in the military, and the idea of the military going to occupy another country sounds awful. But that to me, when I think about this, seems like the tried and not very true playbook of the United States war machine, which is to come in and occupy, um, build bases and spend trillions of dollars and stuff to install democracy. Um, I guess, do you think the Venezuelan people welcome would welcome that type of like bold interdiction as far as welcoming another country into their country, or do you think that that would lead to war? Because we're all sick of war.
yeah, I think we're sadly and ignorantly rooting for the results that, they got on Maduro and everybody was happy. Now everybody is like, what the fuck? What's happening? Okay. That's a reality because, like, everybody was expecting for, you know, the US to come in, remove all these five families, and put Maria Corina Machado and Mundo Gonzalez on like a red carpet. They're going to come into the country. They're just going to walk into the capital city, you know, they're gonna close the new as Congress, the socialist Congress that the Venezuelan regime has built over the past years, and now there's a Democratic Congress, and everybody's happy. So I don't know. Maybe there will be other elections, and it'll end up being this thing of maybe like Delcy against Maria Corina. Okay. But then the elections will be monitored by the US. The government will not be allowed to just use their voting system that they developed that have
Hmm.
been selling to other nation states. Okay. And it'll be fully audited by the US. And maybe then finally Maria Corina Machado wins. But until then, I don't know how long it's going to be. I don't know if that's 6 months or 2 years or 4 years. But history takes time to unravel, man.
Yeah.
Right?
So Maduro's bodyguards, all the ones around him were Cuban, right? And was that an element of the situation that there was an element of foreign interference or control behind the scenes? And maybe now that's been removed so that things will be able to play out without at least, again, foreign influence from Cuba or elsewhere?
Yeah, I would really much think that is correct. Honestly, o sea, they removed the Cubans from the equation on the like the cost of the Venezuelan regime. So they're like now they are monitoring them fully, not the Cubans. And like I think it's also a fact of Maduro had been since the beginning an illegitimate president, man, an illegitimate president. Personally being guarded by the Cubans.
Man. Can you give me an idea of what it was like growing up in that kind of corruption? Like, I mean, did you have to deal with this on I remember I used to work for a company that was based in Chicago, Illinois. And one of my coworkers had previously worked for a construction company. And he said every day they would show up to the construction site, and the foreman on the site would have 3 brown bags of cash, and one brown bag of cash went to the police, and one brown bag of cash went to the inspectors, and one brown bag of cash went to the politicians. And and that's Chicago is like notoriously horrific when it comes to bribery and corruption. But can you give me an idea of like, is this something that you saw on a daily basis that you grew up with that you just literally thought was the way the world worked?
Yeah, I mean, it's it's sad to see it was immensely sad seeing this gradual process of bribing becoming a normal thing. Okay, like a societal effect, right? Like I'm not able to make my living with what I make, whatever, and everybody tries to just like bribe other people, honestly. And everything is about a bribe. Everything is about charging more of like whatever. And obviously the police and the military owning a cut of everything, of all the transport of like from, whatever we ended up producing or whatever. You always have to pay a cut. And if you don't pay the military directly, it's like always a cut, okay? Different cuts. First, I think like these guys made it impossible to run like a company in Venezuela. Okay. If you open up a company and you want to legally operate, you need like 19 papers, 19 different papers that the government has to approve you and that you have to pay on a yearly basis. Okay. You're like, okay, your tax rate ends up being like 30%. And then the police take 30% from you. And maybe you get rocked and you lose the other 30%. So 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 dude, it's really very very hard process, but also I would say the just how insecure it becomes. It was always I'm sorry, unsafe, okay? It was always an unsafe country. I grew up in this like what is it? Almost um like nightmare of being potentially kidnapped or robbed or whatever. I was kidnapped twice. My parents were kidnapped once. So it was normal, okay? And like um it was normal.
That's
Like being
insane. Like
part of
it's like getting
medium
kidnapped is
medium
normal.
class. Yeah,
Yeah.
medium class family. It was pretty probable to have like a sibling or a close family member that had been kidnapped. That became normal. Okay.
And they just take you and hold you for ransom, right?
They hold
primarily.
you for, whatever. They
Yeah,
take your car. They
yeah.
won 10,000, $40,000 overnight. And it's like, how? All the family starts asking for money. So,
And
yeah,
when you say
man.
they, is that just private individuals doing this, or is it individuals associated with the government who was carrying out these ransom schemes?
Okay, so this is how it works. It's basically the what the government did is they bribed 2,500 generals or so in the military. Okay, that's a rough estimate. That's not like a hard figure. Okay, and then below that, what they do is just allow them to rob whatever the fuck you want, whatever you rob. Give me a cut. Okay, you get paid your base salary. You're not able to live with that. Okay, and get inside the military and the police people from the favelas. Okay, so like burglars, basically, right? Malandros, as we say in Spanish in Venezuela.
Melandros.
Malandros. So,
After you got kidnapped the first time and your dad and your mom had to pay to get you ransomed out, and then you got kidnapped again, do you think that they were like, man, this kid, he's just really got to learn to keep his head on a swivel. This little guy is like, I don't know, he's costing us a lot of money. Maybe we just let him have him for a while. Just leave that guy there. Sorry, I was trying to make kidnapping into a funny thing, and I was struggling to do it.
you're
So.
you're good, man. You're good, man. I think that for better or worse, the superpower that Venezuelans have had to like learn is trying to, get humor out of the
Yeah,
bad situations. Because ironically, it's a good way to try to deal with trauma,
Yeah,
right?
one would
Humor.
think. Yeah,
I want to talk about the Venezuelan superpower because you mentioned something earlier that was really fascinating. You talked about the Venezuelan diaspora, all these refugees around the world as being a strength. There's like a knowledge network of people distributed around the world, that now I suppose a lot of them are like you with a lot of expertise they've acquired and also a foundation of experience knowing the horrors of socialism and just ready to rebuild maybe. So what does that look like? Is that diaspora going to converge back on Venezuela, or is this a network that's going to be wherever they are supporting things? What does that look like?
Yeah, great question. I think it's gonna take many years. I see what's happened with El Salvador, and since everything that the Nayib Bukele effect started happening, I think also the Bitcoiners, us on Bitcoin Twitter, we saw it take at least some years for some Salvadorians to go back to their country, etc. And I expect the same thing to happen in Venezuela because it also varies depending on which migration wave you're part of. Because if you're part of the 2014 and pre 2014 migration wave, okay, you are you're now a dad, you're a mom, okay, you've established bases and bank accounts, and you've helped part of your family maybe migrate and live with you or close to you in the same country. And so the ones that have already lost their grandfathers and don't have their parents in the country, they're not gonna be the first ones to go back, man. I think it's gonna be maybe the ones that are post-pandemic, okay, that had to migrate during the pandemic. They're potentially still not that established outside of Venezuela as the ones that have like over a decade since they've migrated. Okay, so, um, but I believe with the opening of Venezuela, gradual recovery of the rule of law, unsanctioning the state oil company, dollars flowing back legally into the central bank, the Venezuelan's private banking sector being able to use the dollar as legal tender. Because, like, at some point, after the sanctions in the US were introduced in 2017, like in 2020, 2021, most of the transactions in the Venezuelan economy were being done in cash, US dollars in cash. Okay, so there's a ton of billions of dollars in cash in Venezuela that came all from mostly, oil sales, narco traffic, remittances, in like physical remittances of people visiting the country, bringing cash, digital remittances. So how is that going to work? It, are they going to allow the private banking sector to like finally uh, like get those deposits in dollars and recapitalize the Venezuelan banking sector? That's one
Mm.
thing. Will it reconnect the Venezuelan banking sector with the rest of the world? So finally, you know, it's going through Venezuelan companies or whatever, the remittance flow and not going through Binance. So I expect first to see a remote and digital reconnection of Venezuela with that like vast network of more than 8 million Venezuelans spread it across the globe, man. Okay. And yes, maybe it's also this. There's many Venezuelans working in multinationals. There's many Venezuelans working in Silicon Valley. There's many Venezuelans in Israel. There's many Venezuelans in Spain, man. Okay. So they are the ideal people to also help the company and the
Yeah.
industry where
Mhm.
they work at to figure out the way to invest in Venezuela.
I see that as so huge. I see people looking at Venezuela now as an opportunity, not just Venezuelans, other people wondering, like, Venezuela used to be immensely rich. It used to be the gem and the jewel of South America, and it can be that again. And you're seeing people wondering, how can I take part in that? And they're going to look, oh, I know a Venezuelan down the street. He used to be a judge. Now he's cleaning dishes at the local restaurant, and people with connections on the ground. And that huge network is going to be such a valuable way for capital, I think, to find a home and help rebuild, hopefully.
I sure hope so, man. Honestly, I think there is Venezuela's just disconnected from the world.
Mhm.
None of the oil revenues for the past almost 10 years since the sanctions have been really like hitting the economy. It's been hitting private accounts of the regime. Okay. And then they decide, or like whatever. And then they decide Maduro still has an 8 billion euro account in the Vatican. What's the Vatican going to do with the money? Is it going to give it back to Venezuela? Come on, man.
Seems unlikely. Yeah, that seems unlikely. I like how you paused there to let
Rhetorical
us
pause,
answer
yeah.
as though, yeah, you really think that's going to happen. One of the best like online documentary things I've seen is this a guy. It's called the Y Files. I forget the guy's name. Um, but there's this one about the secret war that the United States ran after World War II, and it was basically World War II ends and the United States goes into Germany and they're like, "Hey Nazis, you want a job? You're not, doing Nazi stuff anymore, but would you like to work for us?" And they're like, "Yeah." And they're like, "Sweet." The Vatican said that they would be our bank so that we could have a cutout, and the mafia would also like to be a part of this. So we're just going to pay you guys for the next 50 years to blow up buildings and conduct domestic terrorism in order to fight socialism. And I was like, that's fascinating. And also, Catholicism has some really interesting thoughts on banking. They really get their fingers into a lot of stuff. Good for them. Good for them. Um, yeah. Uh, man, I don't really know what else to talk about here. I'm just like, it's so fascinating to learn about. Like, I think that we've nationalized a lot of industries in the United States. Like in 2008, you know, the golden parachutes given to all of the people in Wall Street, that to me is the nationalization. Is like, hey, you're going to get bought out, and now you do whatever we want. The automobile industry as well, the dairy industry, literally the entire agricultural industry, the energy industry, the airline industry, etc. We just don't have it quite as blatantly out front nationalization as some other countries. Um, but you lived through that kind of when Maduro like truly kind of outright nationalized things and just flat
Yeah.
out took stuff. Was there anything good during that time? Like, was there anything that was like, oh, things got better? Or like you did mention, did you say that you were mining Bitcoin with free electricity?
Yeah, it was basically free. It was really
There you go.
basically free. Yeah, it was really basically free, man. Um, Look, I would say out of maybe this is a hard take and a very bad take, okay?
Hell
But
yeah.
maybe out of everything that it really wasn't nationalized, but Chavez bought Santander Bank, okay? The
Hmm.
private Santander branch in Venezuela for $800 million, okay? First a first payment of $400 million, and then after I don't know how many years, the rest. That became the Banco de Venezuela. It became the first bank that the state private bank that the Venezuelan state owned, okay, under the Chavez regime. Obviously it's been done many times but by other regimes in Venezuela, okay, for 100 years, 60 years, okay. So it was his way of doing his own bank, right? Today that's the bank that issues the most amount of loans and has the most amount of accounts in Venezuela. It is estimated that almost all Venezuelan families, like at least one family member, has an account at the Banco de Venezuela. So really, it was like this weird socialist way of socializing banking. Okay, you're socializing banking. It's very free to open an account. If you open the your account at the Banco de Venezuela, that's how you get the subsidies from the government.
Okay.
Okay, all that kind of stuff. So I would say that out of everything that they put their hand on, the thing that just like struck me the most is how they were really able to operate through the bank, man, a way to give. Obviously you force people because you
Yeah.
destroy the currency, so you force people to try to eventually get into digital form of money, get them out of cash, okay. And so that was really interesting how a socialist government and socializing the money printer of the central bank and raping the central bank and using it to your own like social experiment and social and economic benefit, and having a combination of the control of the central bank plus a publicly owned, like a private bank, but actually publicly owned by the state, kind of. So they were really able to like foster the adoption of a, a bank accounts in Venezuela, something that none of the private banks had been able to do.
All right.
But for the rest,
There's a
they
win.
destroyed the
Yeah.
electrical grid. They destroyed the oil production. They destroyed all the agricultural production. They stole all the gold. They own all the coffee, the water, the whatever, the coltan, the bauxite, the silver. They own the military. They own the you know
Just everything. Actually, that brings up a question I had, because you said that there's this like payment of like whatever $500 billion or something. I think is what you said, or 500
yeah,
million.
500 million.
500 million that came, that is like earmarked to buy agricultural products from the United States. Do they need to buy agricultural products from the United States? I mean, because there's a massive agricultural capacity in Venezuela, but I assume that they have just ravaged it to the point that you just can't really produce. You're going to need a couple years to build up that capacity again.
Absolutely.
Okay.
One could argue that there is a moral factor into all this deal. It's basically a trade deal, right?
Yeah, it's just
It's a trade.
The United States trying to prop up the agricultural prices, which are depressed because they are flooding. Like, I mean, because we subsidize our agriculture industry
It's a trade
to a
deal.
huge degree.
It's a
Yeah,
trade deal.
yeah,
I buy oil from you and you buy these products from me. That's everything that the Trump administration is trying to do with
yeah.
every single
He's
country,
a
right?
deal maker. Yep.
Get a trade deal, right? The deal maker. Part of the deal started being that the Trump administration would control the funds of the oil sales, okay, in like a US bank account, and give that to, I don't know, technology and infrastructure to rebuild the
Okay.
electrical infrastructure in Venezuela and agricultural products and medicine. So one could argue that, to your point, a part of the deal is because, well, the agricultural part, Venezuela doesn't have the production to feed all the people that we need to feed. I don't think that's a huge reason of the deal, man.
Yeah, I
I
mean,
think
8
it.
million
I
people
think
left,
it's
so there's not that many
yeah.
people to feed anymore, and they're all old people. They don't eat much.
What I need is John Deere trucks, right? Pesticides, U.S. pesticides. That's what I need, man.
Mhm.
Right? And I just gotta pay my people in Venezuela and start investing in fucking Venezuelan agriculture and remove the military from the camps so that people can freely fucking cultivate and sell. Right? That's what we need, man. It's still a rule of law thing inside of Venezuela. But okay, I get it. And I think that's the first step. And I also believe that, again, initially, the idea was for the US to control the funds. The fact that at least now the funds are going through the Venezuelan central bank, that is very positive because that means that eventually, just like with Argentina, we will have more dollars, right, from exports to be able to sell them in the Venezuelan banking system and gradually open up the dollar. Open up the dollar rate in Venezuela. It's not controlled anymore. The Venezuelan central banks doesn't decide it any longer. It's a bidding process. It's a supply and demand game of the banks in the country bidding for the dollars that the Venezuelan central banks has.
I mean,
Man,
you so
I've learned a
yeah,
lot
you
about
talk about
Venezuela. Yeah, go ahead, Grant.
the remaining military elements in Venezuela being a problem. I mean, how extensive is that? So now you're going to have to Venezuela's going to have to enter a stage where you guys are going to have to reckon with how do we look at our neighbors who were on the other side? And that's a tough thing for a lot of countries to do. And how do you see that playing out, that what is called transitional justice in Venezuela? How do you see wide scale justice being done? Is there still rancor and animosity towards the people who are on the other side, or will people be able to come back and pretty much, accept that everybody did something and just go forward?
Yeah. Look, one of the main things that Chavez did to the military National Guard was the the duty of the National Guard in Venezuela before Chavez was to protect civilians. Chavez changed that to protect the president. Okay. We need that to change. We need that to change back and to be to protecting the civilian. How do we do that? I don't know, man. But we need a leader that talks to the military again. Because I believe the military will need to be re educated. And the military will also in itself look for a new leader. We can say that maybe elections come again and they're transparent and finally the government doesn't have a way of saying, hey, we won. And Maria Corina wins, or Edmundo wins, or whoever, whichever figure wins. If they're not able to talk to the military, which in many cases in Latin American presidential history, man, is what has happened with right wing governments. They're mostly medium class to high class people that haven't been through poverty like most of the military guards, okay? And they don't know how to talk to them. And the military guys are not convinced by those guys. Also, the military in a way always needs an enemy, man. Who's our enemy now?
Yeah. Yeah, because their enemy has just been, I mean, they didn't really have an enemy, but they've been just preying on the populace, right? Just
Huh?
extracting from the people.
Uh-huh.
Or was
Uh-huh.
the enemy like
Yeah.
was there some social,
The enemy is the Chavismo.
yeah, like there's a capitalist boogeyman
The
or,
enemy is the
yeah.
Chavismo. And I believe that a day will come that the military guards will rise against every single Chavism ideology. There just hasn't been an opposition leader that talks both to the people and the military. Because in the case of a country like Venezuela, which are almost the equivalent of North Korea in South America, they're different.
And I don't know, that kind of sums it up for me, man. You've like painted this incredibly vibrant and just you have such a depth of knowledge and energy to speak about Venezuela and to talk thoroughly about it. Your matriculation through the Bitcoin mining world and into working with with leaden and then onto the derivatives and stuff. And um, it's just this is like a master class in Venezuelan macro and politics and internal social dynamics and stuff. So um,
No,
I don't have
I have another
anything else,
question.
but
So
what I
this is
yeah,
a
I was
really,
just gonna
yeah,
say
this is a
throw it
really
to
practical
Grant.
question for me. So I have a friend who lives in Cabimas, and he broke his ankle. He broke his
Yeah,
ankle recently, and he had to go to a hospital that was kind of like a shadow hospital. He said that you don't go to the state hospital because everything there is recycled and it's not safe. So he had to go to some just private hospital of some sort. Now he's kind of swimming in medical bills, and I want to send him some Bitcoin. So what is the stack that somebody would use to, like, what is the wallet to use in Venezuela for somebody who's Spanish speaking in South America? How do they then, if they get Bitcoin, what will they use to convert that into a usable currency there? Like, what would you recommend for the stack to get something into Venezuela?
Yeah. I look, 98% plus of the volume in Venezuela is Binance.
Hmm.
It's Binance and via P2P. So if you were to send truthfully speaking, if you were to send some Bitcoin to somebody in Venezuela that needs to exchange them to pay for whatever services, goods, meds, etc., he's gonna need to swap then for USDT on Binance. That's gonna be the cheapest way, and then sell the USDT P2P for bolivars. That's it,
Or
man.
he's gonna have to
really
find
Yeah.
somebody locally or just somebody he knows who will accept the USDT for the Boulevard to get that done.
gross.
Or basically open an account on Binance
Okay.
and receive your Bitcoin on Binance and change the Bitcoin for USDT and the USDT P2P on
Okay.
Binance.
Okay.
And sometimes for people that haven't dealt with crypto, that's very
Yes. Yeah.
complicated. But in the case of when you're talking to a Venezuela, there's a high probability that he will be able to reach out to somebody who can help them to sell the Bitcoin for USDT and the USDT P2P for bolivars.
So he needs to find that local person with expertise to help him get it done. He's an older gentleman and he's very curious and
Okay.
but not any technical capacity, but he's got the will and wants
Yeah.
to learn, which I think is the position of a lot of Venezuelans. They want to, yeah, they want to learn and get ahead. So
Man, look, that's to wrap it up on my end. I think that is the real side of the Bitcoin story in Venezuela. It is millions of Venezuelans finding a lifeline in a parallel system that allowed them to reconnect with their family, to continue making a life, to finally, save for the long term in many cases. Okay. And dude, that is the real power of Bitcoin inside of Venezuela. It's the knowledgeable. You have a knowledgeable society in crypto. It like in Venezuela. Honestly,
Yeah,
the it you it is it. I
it
believe
sounds
it
like a
is.
much higher general aptitude than the United States, really.
yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
A 100%. Maybe it doesn't go all the way in some cases to things like self-custody and hardware wallets and running your own node. Because you also need for those things also a little bit more budget, man. Honestly, like if you don't even have the money, if you're not even able to save on a monthly basis, how are you going to buy Bitcoin to eventually have also enough Bitcoin for it to make sense for you to buy a treasure on Amazon,
Right.
okay, import it into Venezuela for $250 or whatever. You know what I mean? But Venezuelans like they see really Bitcoin and crypto as money. We know it's even better than our currency. You know what I mean? And Venezuelans have become this like payments juggernauts, okay? And like you are a mental payments freak when you have a small business in Venezuela. You accept PayPal, you accept Amazon gift cards, you accept Bitcoin, you accept Binance Pay, you accept Zelle, you accept USDT, you accept USDC, you accept Salo Dollar. You know, okay, and you'll sometimes you don't have the tool to select back to bolivars because you don't know how to do the P2P or the connection or whatever, but you pay 10 to 20% to move the money around. So I believe that Venezuela is still and will finally explode its potential once again in the Bitcoin and I would say mostly Bitcoin and stable coins experiment that Venezuela is. And I believe we will finally retake a part of the global share of the sea, man. In this game theory global game, okay? Venezuela once was a big part of the global hash rate. At some point, I believe we had more than 50% of global hash rate. Russia right now is at something like that, 15 or 18% or something. We could be Russia's next Bitcoin mining competitor.
Man, truly so well said. Like the hope that comes from this military action, from removing Maduro, the hope that comes for a once great and still proud nation that has a quarter of its inhabitants are now living outside of the country, but truly embody the spirit that you have, this Venezuelan spirit that wants to come home, that wants to make things better. When I lived in Colombia, one of the things that I came away with was just being in South America in general. You can just feel this latent potential that there is something great that could happen. And, um, the natural resources, the people, the work ethic, the just favorable weather, favorable geographical conditions. It makes it actually very hard to conduct military operations in South America because you're so excluded from everybody else. You're very far away. And so you have the same sort of geographical barrier and safety that the United States has always had, which makes it difficult to attack
Yeah.
the United States domestically. So um, I just want to thank you for taking the time to give us your time. It's been wonderful following you on Twitter and seeing the things that you post and hearing about, how you came up through the system and what you're doing now. Um, and how you have so much energy right now for Venezuela and you're so optimistic about things. So, yeah, El Sultan Bitcoin on Twitter is your handle. And, dude, just a gangster, man, absolute gangster, OG Bitcoin mining, and a guy that's really like truly building and making change in Bitcoin. So, Sultan, man, thanks
I
for
was
your
gonna say
time.
thank you
We
too, and
really
just
appreciate it.
it's so great to hear you
Yeah.
talk. America needs to hear your voice. The world does, and I just see a bright, bright future for you and the rest of the Venezuelan people. It fills me with hope to hear you talk. So thanks for coming on. I appreciate it.
No, thanks, Lucas, and thank Grant. Guys, ultimately, if my family and I had waited for a U.S. intervention instead of going down the Bitcoin rabbit hole, today we'd be poor.
Yeah, well said.
I'm I'm in this shit because Bitcoin saved my family. That's it.
That's so
Yeah,
beautiful,
that's
man.
excellent.
That's so beautiful. All right. Thanks a lot.
All
I'm
right,
gonna
guys.
I'm gonna hit
Have a good
stop.
one. I
Yeah.
appreciate it.